Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, brought to you by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab. I'm Randy Johnston with my co-host Brian Tankersley, and we're very fortunate to have a guest today from Dext Software, Stephen Edgington. He's joined Dext about 3 years ago, and we've been around Dext, the product, for the better part of 15 plus years, so have known the product for a long time. I use Dext in my K2 Canada operation, and we have used that really since it was available in Canada. So we have a fairly long history with the platform, but Stephen, not so long with you. Can you give a bit of an introduction and background to our listeners, please?
Sure, absolutely. So actually, I'll give you a little bit more of a background, so it might help in explaining how I think about the product. So when I first started out, my kind of background is really computer science and software engineering, and I set up a business and I founded that for 14 years. And that business was consulting with businesses all around the world, many in the US, working on manufacturing systems, going to companies and looking at how to transform them and really bring them to life, which gives you an incredible amount of kind of exposure to how companies work. And that business successfully sold to a company in the US called Epicor, who's an ERP company. They're quite large. And in effect, I then worked at Epicor for 7 years as Chief Innovation Officer, helping lead that team and drive that. So that gave me a lot of background into lots of different businesses and how they work. And then Dext, fairly recently, so you obviously worked with Dext before I was there, but I've been there now for 3 years, and a lot has changed over that time. And really coming into Dext, I am the Chief Product and Technical Officer there. I've got about 200 people in my team and sit over product, engineering, support, AI, and help shape the future, really. That's what we do. And I'm really excited to sort of get your perspectives and also share where we're going next in the world of accounting.
Well, that is super. In fact, it's nice to know about the Epicor manufacturing background too, because we had the good fortune of being Epicor's largest reseller in the United States back in the 80s. So do have some history with multiple companies. So I'm surprised we had not bumped into you while you were at Epicor, but things happen for a reason. So the reason now must be that you've got control, and I guess I'll say vision and insight as to where you're trying to take this platform. I think you have a fairly substantial team that report to you at this point. Is that true?
Yeah, so I said over about 200 people. And yeah, you can imagine, not only is AI transforming what we can do in the product, it's also transforming how we build products. Yeah. And it's pretty amazing to be in business at this point in time where you can leverage this technology to do just so much more. So
Yeah.
super exciting. And there's various different elements. Dext, we processed about 353 million documents last year. So that's invoices and receipts. And in a single day, we'll do over 1.5 million. And so, there's lots of companies that will claim, oh, yeah, we can do that. We're using AI to do this. But the big question is, how do you do it at scale? How do you make sure it's right? How can you rely on it? And, that requires you to have quite sophisticated sampling methods, teams that check, auditors that check the auditors. And that's exactly what we do at Dext. And that's why, we've got a very good, I truly believe we've got a very good product in the market that's loved by customers all around, and they depend on us. And we are there to support that process. Small businesses, and I was one. I had a business for 14 years. I would have loved Dext if I could use that in my business. It just wasn't around in the days we were using Sage, and other tools.
Mhm.
It's very manual. And now being able to transform a business and help them, especially when there's an accountant and bookkeeper involved in that relationship, is just so powerful because it lets the business owner focus on what they can do uniquely. And in the world of AI now, it kind of opens up another whole sort of level for people to work at, both in the accounting and bookkeeping world and in businesses. So it's a super exciting time.
It is super exciting. In fact, our listeners know, but you would not know that about me, as I actually have a computer science background as well, and have worked on AI for a little over 50 years at this point because I was writing AI 50 years ago in Lisp. So, have some unusual background that most accounting professionals don't have. Now, on the other hand, on this, I remember what a bugger it was for Dex to work out the machine learning in the early days because it was hard to get these bloody transactions classified correctly. But it sounds like you've got some new technologies that may be a bit of a breakthrough for the platform. Can you give us some insight on that?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people think Dex Technologies OCR. Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, it's just OCR, optical character recognition, which is still an element of like there's a lot of intelligence that goes into OCR, but it's very much more complicated than that. To as you would know, to do real good machine learning and AI, you need data, and you need good quality data, and you need lots of it. And luckily, Dex has been around for a long time. That we've got billions of documents, terabytes of data that's all well labeled, but it's not just well labeled, it's also been, double checked by financially acute, understanding professionals and then put into ledgers. Yeah. So you've got kind of like very high trust data. And what we do is, the transformer architecture, which again, many listeners probably won't understand what that is, but that's the kind of underpinning technology that is in ChatGPT. That paper was released by Google sometime in 2017. And that was the real sort of inflection point in the industry that really unlocks all the things that we're doing today with AI. And in fact, Dex uses that similar technology, but not massive, huge models. We use what's called small language models that do this. So they're very specialized and they help us just focus on a particular element. And that's what gives us the ability to get to that 99% accuracy, because it's like a collection of small language models that helps us do our processing. And so that's not the new thing we'll be talking about, but that's important to understand, that it's not just a case of taking a document and sending it to somebody else and getting back all the answers. Yeah. You've got to, get the data out of the document that's correct and use all of the dimensions for it. The currency might not be stated. You've got to take into account the context of where the country is. You might be in Canada, but you're in the US. Yeah, because someone's traveling and buying something, and the tax implications of that are different when it kind of comes. You might have a supplier, is 7-Eleven, but that's not what you want to put into the accounting software, because you don't want it to be populated with all these different suppliers. You want it to know that, no, we put that in as gas, or we put that in as like consumable. So on the surface, it sort of seems like, oh, well, why is it so hard? In fact, the hardest field we have to predict is the supplier, because it's the one that's actually, it's not what's on the document, it's what you want it to be accounted for. And also there's nuances, like if you see someone has bought a laptop, well, maybe their business is to sell laptops. It's very different to if they are buying a laptop for a staff member, how they'll categorize that. So there's like all these nuances that you need to kind of take into account. But again, that's all what we do all the time. And it's it's in every country, it's in multiple languages, it's in all these different currencies. It's one page, it's a picture of a CRT monitor for the daily sales. It's a coffee stained receipt, crumpled up. So we see everything, as you can imagine. And then what's really good about AI is you can train on this, you can refine on this. It loves data. And these models now are getting really pretty powerful. So obviously there's a huge amount of investment going into these data centers, 50 billion, well, 500 billion, like Stargate, OpenAI, XAI, and these kind of factories, these token factories that are just filled with high-powered GPUs and compute, are crunching data to produce tokens, and train new models that can help predict the next value. And these models now are getting to the point that we can do even more with them. And so as an example, as you'll know, when you use Dext, a document comes in via various different methods. We might collect it from email. We might collect it from a supplier website. We might get it from somebody taking a picture on their mobile app. And we'll process that, and then you'll look at it most of the time. You might automatically publish it to your accounting software, but you may make a change. You might change the description. You might change a tracking category or a dimension in QuickBooks. You might decide to flag something or move something. You might decide that delivery notes or supply notes, you want to put them into a different area. And all those changes we've captured for the last 14 odd years. And those changes.
I'm sorry to step over you there, but I've been reflecting on a couple of comments that I wanted to call out for our listeners. In prior episodes, we've discussed these language models, from the narrow to small to medium to large, and how they are fit for purpose. So I think it's really fascinating that you've been using a small language model, a narrow language model to do this matching. And there's some real benefits to doing it in that style, number one. Then the second thing, your comment about billions of transactions that have been accurately coded by accountants into these systems. So in effect, you've got some of the best accounting transactional data set, possibly the best in the world. I don't know that in fact, but billions of transactions properly classified over a decade plus of time is pretty darn stunning in today's world. So that really sets you in position, as I would see it, Stephen, for a brilliant future where we can begin applying even more AI concepts to the data. So I think that's where you're headed. Sorry, that's where I stepped over the top of you, but I think that's where you're headed.
Yeah, let me explain that maybe a little bit more. So we've got, the large labs, OpenAI, Anthropic, like if you wanted to build a large language model today, you need billions in kind of investment. In fact, Andrej Karpathy, who was one of the founders at OpenAI, who now actually has put together, there's a great blog post. He's an excellent sort of tutor on these things, but he recreated ChatGPT 2. Yeah. And he kind of calculated that. He compressed, like 7 years ago, they released ChatGPT 2 that no one really hears about, but that was the early model that really gave the science of intelligence. And he recreated that now, taking all the learnings. And you had to spend like 50 million before, and now you can do it with $50, right? In 7 years. That's the compression of like time and technology and everything. And there's a great stat as well, like, when you look at the speed of the rise of the internet and then the speed of the rise of ChatGPT, it was kind of like, one AI year is 7 internet years, to get to 800 million users. So this technology, we're in, a lot of people call the exponential era. This technology is just getting better, but people, when we talk about billions and these things, like they lose kind of like, how do you bring this back to reality, right? And the reality is there's these large models that are really generalist. If you're on ChatGPT or Anthropic Claude on your phone and you ask it a question, it seems to be an expert in everything. It probably mostly is, but it will get things wrong, and that's why there's a warning at the bottom. These things will get things wrong. Can it extract data from an invoice? Sometimes. Sometimes it gets it right, sometimes it gets it wrong. But these models aren't specialists, and they don't have all the checks and balances of a specialist because they are very large generalists. And that makes them very powerful. But if you can distill that down to just like focus on one thing, just like nature does, like you start to specialize, right? And you don't end up, there's not just one type of bird, there's not one type of animal, there's lots of specialists that, it's all trade-offs. And these language models, small and large, have trade-offs. When they're small, they can be fast, they don't drift, they can sort of get things. But if you can combine the two, you get something pretty amazing. And that's what we're kind of introducing, is a thing called Dext Assist, which you probably won't have seen yet, but it's the next evolution. And so Dext originally had a very rudimental thing called supplier rules, which is if it's this supplier, set this category on the transaction. Works well for lots of things. If it's 7-Eleven and we know that they just always fill up with gas and, it kind of gets coded to that transaction, or if it's like from this supplier, we know it's always the same, works great. Completely falls apart when it's Amazon. And people are buying more from Amazon because sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. Sure, you can do line item extraction and get the breakdown of the items, but what are we going to categorize things as? Likewise, some of your clients, when you're working with them, they want to have like a bit more interesting treatment of documents. So we've got a good example is we have one of our accountants has a client and they provide hire vehicles to Formula One teams that travel all around the world at different events. And, that sounds like great. So obviously we get lots of invoices from them for this hire company. But what they want is they want them categorized to a dimension which represents the country that race is in, so that they can do analytics and see how much did we spend and, kind of like all of that for each of these different races, for marketing analysis, etc. And so there's somebody in that bookkeeping firm that has to look and go, oh, Valencia, that's Spain. Oh, Abu Dhabi, that's this one. And so you can imagine in Dext, our AI gets all the information correct, but we didn't know what they were trying to do with this because sometimes the category doesn't exist yet. Yeah, that country doesn't yet exist in QuickBooks. So you've kind of got to do two things. You've got to go add the country. You've got to be able to connect the dots between the city and the fact you want to be the country. Look at this other context. And so what we've introduced with Dext Assist is pretty magical. It looks at all the changes that you do over the last sort of like 12 months of an account. Every single field change you've made on a document. And then it basically leverages large language models to, in effect, try and establish what's the subconscious rules that you're applying for that client. And then put that into natural language guidance. Okay. And then every time a document gets processed, after it's been through all the small language models and been validated and all the checks and it's looked at everything else and we know that it's correct, now apply guidance. And the guidance can do everything from flag a transaction that looks like it's personal, yeah, versus business. Or it could be like set the country dimension to be the value, the country that this document's in. Yeah, no, it's like you'd explain that to a bookkeeper and they'd get it. Try and write that, as a computer scientist. It's impossible. How do you know what could, it's really hard, but these models can really do that well, especially when they're shown lots of examples and they've got access to tools. So Dext Assist is basically our evolution of supplier rules. It takes it from a if this then that to just describe what you want to do in natural language. And it can do things like move anything that looks like it's not an invoice to the archive. Yeah. Flag items that we want to check are correct. Yeah. So anything you can do in the interface, the guidance can do. And what's really powerful about our guidance is the guidance can be shared across your clients in a practice. So not only we're not saying, hey, come into this area and type your subconscious thoughts of how you do the bookkeeping, because no one knows what they do. Good bookkeepers, good accountants, it's just instinctive. You've done it so many times, you just know how to code things, right? And so that's what's really powerful is these models are really powerful at finding patterns and extracting kind of reason. And so we're basically using the large language models, the expensive thinking models to go, how do we save you more time? How do we look at these edits? And so Dext Assist, that's our new capability. It's a kind of not needed for all clients. It's just needed for some of those clients, especially the ones that you spend the most time on. And yeah, we'd love your thoughts on how you think that might work in your experience.
Yeah, understood. And this multi-layer model is a big deal. It's been around in Dext for some time, but not interactive like you're describing. And in fact, we considered last year, 2025, the year of agents, and we considered this year the year of model context protocol, MCPs, which we have covered in another accounting technology lab. And in effect, these models that can interface to AI with natural language, applying logic and so forth, we think that's another big breakthrough. And I was reflecting on how this classification could work because in our case, we do cross the border. We have some transactions in the US and some in Canada. And, if we're getting a maple donut, let's say in Canada, that's a pretty common purchase many times at a convenience store like a 7-Eleven. So, how do you classify a donut purchase in the morning? Well, Brian, I'm going to actually call you in at this point because you have been pretty quiet this time around. And I know that you've also used Dext through the years, but there might be some other lines of reasoning and questions that you might have for Stephen and that you think would be helpful for our listeners.
Sure. So, Stephen, one of the challenges that I've seen with adoption to all kinds of tools that ingest information is that, the Dext does a great job of taking the data out of the unstructured formats of the images of the documents and converting into digital data and putting the right context on it. However, getting the data from there into some of the more arcane systems that are out there. You dealt with Epicor. I don't know if Dext has an interface into Epicor or not, but I mean, there are a lot of systems out there like, Acclivity or, some of the others in the space where there isn't a direct interface. Do you see any innovation happening with the AI code generation to help people create bespoke import tools to get that information into those systems?
Great question. Yes. So first of all, Dext doesn't work with Epicor yet. Obviously, I understand all the APIs of Epicor and how it could do that. We also, I mean, our main focus initially and our main 36 plus integrations are to the smaller online cloud-based, kind of general ledgers that are typically API first and have got clean ways to work. Where things get more complicated with larger systems is where this customization comes in. So you post an invoice and you need certain custom fields now populated, or, and there's ways to do that. But Dexter's kind of like originally been really focused on that sort of super simple self-serve. There's no, you need weeks to implement this. You can start a trial online. You can be up and running the same day. Yeah, you can process transactions and just really start to see a return on investment. Whereas with an ERP system, you're kind of rolling that out over 9 months. Now, to your point on AI tools and generation, so there's a few dimensions we're looking at next. MCP, I'll talk about that in a bit, but MCP is kind of one unlock. We weren't or aren't really thinking about MCP from a how do we leverage this to get data into other systems. But your point on code generation and in effect, and also I think computer automation is super interesting because there are now ways you could absolutely, without knowing any code, process items into Dext in an unintegrated way, have Dext do all the work, and then have an AI read the browser of Dext and then automate manual software on your desktop and type that into a format. So that's achievable now.
You're talking about robotic process automation there, right?
Well, RPA, yeah. So Blue Prism and these old RPA systems are kind of like no longer really that relevant. You've now got the likes of like Claude Cowork as an example that will control browsers, your desktop software. It can do this now. Yeah, there's a big divide, or there's a big sort of gap between what these models can actually do and what a lot of the population understand they can do. So you can do that without any knowledge. Yeah, I mean, it would require you to spend time and refine it. It will get it wrong, but you could build something that was reasonable, and then you can take that automation. It won't be fast. It will be quite slow. It'd be using a computer like a human would. But anything that a person can do this day and age on a machine can pretty much be automated, especially if you can guarantee that the data's right and you're just doing an exercise of taking it from here, taking it to there, and having some kind of checks and balances in place. Now, for Dext specifically, we've now got engineers, as you can imagine, using these tools too. We can point it to an application and ask an AI to generate us an interface and interaction to it. What we're looking to do is just open up our APIs more. So we have an API already. We call it extraction as a service. So there are software companies that want to use the power of Dext. Like if Epicor or others wanted to use the power of Dext and have that capability, we actually now sell extraction as a service as an API offering. You don't get the UI, you don't get some of the bits, but you can get the kind of core AI capabilities. And we've already got our a number of customers leveraging that. But the other API we're looking to do is in effect allow people to integrate to us without us knowing. Yeah, and that basically just gives you an API key, get a feed of the documents that have been processed, and that will really help. But I'll get onto the MCP part because I think it's interesting and it kind of relates to some degree to Dext Assist. So, we process documents in and Dext becomes your form for bookkeeping, your automation sort of platform in a firm. Yeah. So your users can use it to save lots of time. Your clients, getting the data in, you've got that's the foundation of getting the data in, making sure it's right and unlocking the value. We've also added in that time tracking now. We'll be releasing soon. And what that does is automatically track how long do your team members that do the bookkeeping in your firm spend doing the bookkeeping on the clients. Yeah. And what that lets you do is if you can now go, okay, we've got 600,000 small businesses that we help do bookkeeping on. We can now order them by who are you spending the most time on. And then you can turn on Dext Assist, on those that need it. Right. And that's a real great, combined with our certification, it's sort of like a three-pronged attack. Yeah. Are your users certified? Do they understand all the tools in Dext? Tick. Yeah. Which clients you spending most time on? These. Enable Dext Assist to perform that action, right? So that's the kind of like, that's the first phase of optimization. MCP lets you then plug Dext, and it's like an AI connector, plug Dext into your productivity tool. Maybe it's ChatGPT in your firm. Maybe it's Claude. Maybe it's Manus. Maybe it's any of the new ones that are just about to like pop up because we see them every day. But the kind of MCP, people like to think of it as USB. I know you've probably covered this, but I don't like to think of it as USB because USB always works. When you plug a USB in it, your mouse, it works, keyboard, it works, right? MCP, though, to me, is a bit more like Bluetooth. Sometimes it works. When it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and you have to like try and pair it. Yeah, like it can be finicky. Sometimes it fails. And really, that's how you should think about MCP. It's not a problem in like, how Dex is implemented or how someone else is. The problem is when multiple things are connected, these models sometimes get confused. There's only so many tools they can have. And so when you plug in more things, there are limits with USB as well. Yeah, I think it's like 127 devices. Yeah, the 128th keyboard won't work. Yeah, but again, these models, they are in effect really intelligent things that you can ask questions to, and then you can connect them to tools, and then they can see these tools and make requests. So just put into practical terms, you can have ChatGPT in your firm, plug in a connector to Dext, and then you can do things like, hey, I've just got a new client. Can you add them? And it will add it to Dext because there's a tool that says add client. And when it knows to call that, it knows I need the name, I need their email address, and maybe their phone number. And it'll ask you, do you want me to send them an invite? Yes. And so automatically, you've not had to use the interface. You've just added the client, set them up, and they've got a message on their phone to download the app and get the documents in. You can also say, hey, how many clients have got items that we haven't processed? Yeah, and so all the data that's in Dext now is available for these models to pull in, reason about, and then come back to you. So then you can say, hey, which clients do we spend the most time on? Yeah, which ones aren't set up properly? Who've got configuration that's different? Yeah, so it starts to unlock a huge potential. And then when you're using, like in Dext, we have more than just the bookkeeping, we also have a thing called data health and insights. And what that does, that's a module that reads data out of the QuickBooks and Xeros, and it pulls it together and it looks for heuristics. Do we have transactions that are miscoded? Do we have categories that aren't set properly? Do we have duplicate contacts because someone's processed things incorrectly? So it's basically like a data, that's what it says on the tin, data health and insights, right? Really powerful. The problem is, don't know how to interpret it. But guess what? These models know how to interpret it. They just need the tools, right? But they don't want to, you can't connect the model to QuickBooks and Xero to get the data. It's like it needs to be processed first in some sensible ways. You've got to have tools over it and a foundation over it. And that's where then, you get to some interesting scenarios because you get to the point where you say to these models, these assistants, who am I meeting with tomorrow? Oh, that client. Give me a summary of, in effect, everything I need to be thinking about. Where have their costs increased? Have they took on someone else? Yeah. And so previously, Dext only had the context of the costs, the sales, the bank transactions. But we also, while I was there, added Vault. And I don't know if you're familiar with Vault, but Vault is the general document store. It's an intelligent document store for everything else. It's the leases, the contracts, the employment contracts, the non-disclosure agreements, everything that's not a cost item, right? But that is super important for advisory, right? Because you can't give advice if you don't have the full picture, right? The AI will tell you complete rubbish if it doesn't have the full picture, but so would a person. If you go and ask them advice about tax planning or anything, they don't know what you're planning, right? So really what we're doing with Dext is building a foundation, a platform that kind of can bring all the context together intelligently for a client to enable you then to do the next level. And MCP, or this AI connector, connecting your tools together with these generalist models like the Claudes and ChatGPTs to specialist systems. Yeah, they're still going to always be specialist systems. That's just the nature of how kind of evolution works. And these specialist systems, in effect, connected to the right productivity tools, unlock some really powerful new capabilities. And it will just save everyone so much time and also allow the advice to be so much higher quality, more real time. But it still requires someone to be accountable, and someone to assure the stuff. So I don't believe the profession's not going away. Yeah, there's still going to be accountants and bookkeepers in the future, but the bar is being raised and the ratio of clients to bookkeepers will go up.
So, it's interesting you compare MCPs to, and the data interfaces between the AI engines and the ERP and the systems of record as, not as reliable as USB. Do you think that there will be what kind of improvement do you expect on those over the next 3, 5, 10, 15 years?
Well, I mean, to be clear, MCP typically is, and a lot of people that are introducing MCPs.
Yeah, I mean,
wrap
we've seen in the
Yeah.
last 2 weeks, we've seen MCPs. We've seen demos of MCPs from Acumatica, NetSuite, many other folks. So it seems like this is the year of the MCP. So again, talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, the problem is, I mean, and again, this I haven't looked at others, but just to sort of like as a broad explanation of it, we started with APIs. Yeah.
Mhm.
So an API is a application programming interface that allows one system to talk to another system. It's a clear sort of like contract that says create the customer, create the invoice, read the values. And you have lots of different types of APIs. Some are well designed, some are not well designed. Yeah, some have got thousands of endpoints. And the problem is, the more complicated the product, you need to know which order to call those APIs. Yeah. Now, MCPs are kind of like not designed for a software application to talk to another software application. An MCP is meant to be the a la carte menu that an AI can use. Yeah, it's kind of like a human kind of interface, right? And the problem is sometimes people generate an MCP over their existing API and they don't rethink what are the questions that people are going to be asking and in effect establishing what should the shape of the tools be. So I think what's going to happen is loads of people are going to be announcing MCPs, launching MCPs, but just because they've got an MCP doesn't mean it's any good. Yeah, it just means that you can plug it in, right?
Yeah.
But it could be like 1,000 entries too many. These models, like, if you go over 50, get confused. Perfect example. In the world of development, like when we're writing code now, it's completely changed. And you can plug MCPs in to open your browser and do things. Yeah. And you can run MCPs to read other things. But these models get confused. They don't know which one to read the logs from. And then they can kind of like waste a lot of tokens and thinking they get, So what you actually want is you really want to know what are the questions I want to ask. And can I get that from the systems? Yeah, from these MCP. And so the question is really kind of like not do you have MCP or not, but what can I solve with this? What is it trying to solve? Is it just trying to create a surface area that lets you do anything you want? Because you can kind of do that through the browser as well. Or is it going to be more efficient? So don't think of the kind of the fragility of MCP, like the Bluetooth analogy. It's not because of the technology. It's because of these models don't know which one to call. Yeah. And I think what's going to happen is you kind of need to work with these. You need a number of iterations, just like anything. Yeah, you need to be able to like get the first version out, get feedback, refine it, get the next one. So you want to look at technology companies that you're working with and make sure that they're continuing to innovate. As soon as you stop innovating, if they're not making releases, they're dead. Yeah, like if you're not seeing changes, it's over. The world now is like there's no excuse not to be making things better, and you've got to get that feedback loop. And in fact, a kind of interesting. So on the MCP, it's like, what do we think accountants and bookkeepers need to be effective? Can we sit with them, watch what they do, and work out? Because when you ask people, what questions do you wish you could ask ChatGPT or Claude about Dext? People are often like, I don't know, I wouldn't know what to ask. But when you show them, hey, you could add clients like this, you can find deadlines, you can chase paperwork. What if you could basically have a scheduled task that before the deadlines required for you doing the preparation? Yeah, it basically looks at the previous year of transactions, how many did they put through, looks who it was, looks in the bank to see which ones are missing associated evidence or, and chases the person that provided it last time. That's a lot of work to do manually. This AI can just do that automatically. And what does it need? Well, it needs a tool to look at transactions that haven't got kind of like unreconciled transactions. It needs a tool to be able to search for previous transactions. Yeah. So, and when you stitch these together, you could create a tool that allows it to provide you with a summary of what needs to be chased. And then you've got another tool, which is send an email. And then you have a scheduled task that says, right, now for all my clients that I need to chase, especially the offenders, can we automate that chasing process? Or better yet, can we help them by setting up AI to go through their mail, to find the invoices, to forward it on? Yeah. So there's just lots of opportunities to sort of like unlock this. So I wouldn't say think whenever you see MCP, think about it with a grain of salt. That's just the first bar. Yeah. The question is, can you get the results out of it when you ask the questions? Can these models understand the tools to use in the right order? Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of learning in that because these models are getting better at, there's actually actual tests these models do now. There's like evals that we call them. Yeah. So like, there's a eval for lots of different things, but there's one for tool calling. Yeah. And so there's a lot of learning and adaptation that's going into these models to work out how do you best call them. And so, don't be put off if you connect your general tools to these MCPs and they don't work as you need to. You need to get the reps in to know how to ask the questions, just like any technology, to kind of get the most out of it. And it's not just a give it a question, get back an answer. Typically, you kind of build in skills. And there's a big thing in the development world now where like a skill is kind of like a text file. It's not complicated. It's a text file that describes how to use the tools. And so you can use skills that help give these models sort of like the Matrix when you learn a new language or something. Yeah, it helps them understand how to use that MCP. And Claude have actually just released what they call plugins that are a collection of MCPs and skills. Yeah, that can sort of help the models understand how to use spreadsheets, how to use kind of like different things. So there's going to be I think it is the world you said before. It's not necessarily just the world of MCP; it's the world of all of this. So it's the agentic world, it's the agents and swarms world, it's the MCP world. Ultimately, this next year is going to be about the mod. We don't need any more powerful models. We just need the existing models at their current capability being leveraged by more people and like connecting the dots between systems. And that's
So
really
what
the interesting.
So what I hear you saying is that the real evolution that's going to happen over the next few years is really through the iteration, through the doing the reps of things.
Yeah.
So effectively what you're saying is that if in the analogy of AI being a gym, the LLM is the gym equipment, the weights, the exercise bike and so forth. And then the challenge for us to get fitter is for us to go do the work and try it and to make mistakes and to figure out how exactly to structure things to make it work better for us in the future.
Exactly. And if you followed along on this kind of Malt book and OpenClaw, or all this kind of like stuff that's been going on, with these like agents and assistants, there will be a point where, well, how we interact with computers is changing. Yeah. You can just talk to it now. It can perform actions for you. Yeah. It can see what you can see.
Mm-hmm.
There's world models can generate games without anyone programming anything. So we are at a point where lots of stuff is changing. Yeah, can you send out to your clients a kind of a voice memo or a video explaining their financials in terms that understand? Absolutely, you can translate things now. It's really powerful, and yeah, it is a little bit like a gym. You have to kind of like get the reps in. I think the challenge is it's like a gym that changes every month. Yeah, so like one prime, but the exercise bike's over there, and then it's like moved over here. Yeah, so you just got to have a mindset which is like, that beginner mindset, and make sure that you're kind of like really leaning into this. It is a bubble and it's not a bubble. Yeah, same respect, like loads of money's going into it, but the technology is real. The change it will transform every industry. Jobs will be displaced, but there'll still be jobs. Yeah, is my view, and there'll be more software. There's lots of scaremongering. It's not going to replace everything. It still needs supervision, but it will be able to allow you to do more. And if you're not using it, competing against someone that is using it, they'll just be able to do more than you, and that's going to be difficult because then prices will come down. But there'll be more businesses, that need support. So I think it's kind of like this real kind of like everything's been thrown up in the air, and the best way of learning in these technologies is to be curious and lean in. I think with regards to like Dext, as an example, and what we're doing in Dext Assist and how we're thinking about this, all of our teams, all of my teams, I mean, Dext is about 400 people. All of our business is reimagining how do we do things. In development is changing how we do things. In support, we have about 50% case deflection now in support. That was 0 a year ago. So now, of the tickets that come in when we're helping people, if they can get an answer immediately, that's great. But not if the answer is rubbish, right? The answer has to be good, and they've got to be happy with it. right? And that requires, so the team that's doing that support now, they're not being sacked. Yeah, half the team. What they're doing now is they're providing better guidance to the AI, writing better articles, using AI to write better articles. And it becomes now you go to like a really, you can get exactly the information you need. And then what we do is we move that to proactive support. So now you'll find that if you trial Dext, maybe someone will reach out to you. Do you need any support? Yeah. Or if you're stuck, or we see that you're stuck, there's a rage click or there's something that hasn't worked, we'll just pop into the chat. Do you need help? Yeah. And there's a human there that can be escalated to. And we believe it's that type of same thing. So you'll have exactly the same thing in the accounting world with your clients. Yeah. Maybe years ago, it was kind of like they drop off a bag of stuff and then you complete the stuff and you're done. Then it's kind of like quarterly. Then some of them might be a bit more real time. But what if you could say, hey, have you noticed this trend? Or I've seen this happen with this other client. We can help you with that. And you can start to, change the trajectory of their business because you can spend more time and analyze it. Yeah. And you're in effect pattern matching across all the clients that are solving this. You've just got that different perspective. They're in the weeds. Yeah, they're solving it, but you can look at it from a different lens, and it's that external view. So, for us, Dext Assist is kind of like just the one next evolution, but it's not, there's so much more to do. It's like, how do you then apply this even further? Schedule jobs over all the work. How do you do more in the bank space? How do we do more in Vault around contracts? Could you like compare them? Can you do sort of like more work? And a lot of the small businesses, they need a tool. Sole traders also need somewhere to keep things safe and secure. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting area, and what we're looking to do is just leverage this technology to make everyone more successful. Our kind of vision is like, making accounting effortless and making time for business. And when you take time and effort, well, let's just reduce both of those, and use technology. But it doesn't remove the human. We're not going out saying this is a replacement to bookkeepers. It's like, no, this is an assist. Yeah. You score more goals. Yeah. If you can kind of like just get set up better, it will make you be more successful. And I think that's really how you should think about this kind of technology. It's like, this is, if you lean into it and you learn it, it's the first technology we've ever had that can teach you how to use it by asking questions. Yeah. How do I, and it's about, so MCP, you've just heard that, you want to know more, ask it to explain to you. Someone said it works like USB. How's that analogy? And it will explain it to you. You can ask it to quiz you, right? Mm-hmm. Show me, ask me multiple choice questions, and based on my response, you use that to work out if I know if I understand it, and then ask me more tough, challenging questions or simpler, challenging questions. So this is like, it's a kind of just a complete new world that is super exciting. And if you don't use it, you'll just look at the news and you'll look at others saying things, and there's many people trying to sell you things that don't work, or that seem to work but don't actually work. Like, you've got to look for, well, how many documents did you transact? How do you validate that it's correct? Yeah, this is hard. It's hard to get 1.5 million a day. It's hard to do 353 million a year if it doesn't work, right? You're not going to get good reviews across external websites if the product isn't good. Yeah, you're not going to be the biggest connected app in QuickBooks and Xero if your product isn't good. So, take with a pinch of salt. Just because it's got AI in its name doesn't mean it's great. Yeah. Test. You got to test. You got to check. But you've got to know what the bar is. So you need to have a good sense for it. I think it just helps to be technical to some degree, but yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit of
It does. So we've had the pleasure of having Stephen Edgington as a guest today. He is product manager and visionary at Dext. Dext has 36 plus integrations, I believe he said earlier, and that includes Xero and Sage and Zoho and Intuit QuickBooks and Bill and Zapier and Reckon and Twinfield and many other products that we've covered in other episodes. So hopefully he's given you a little bit of insight. And perhaps it's time to make sure that you've got your personal trainer around to help you exercise at the gym a little bit more and get some of this right. So, Stephen, it's a pleasure to work with you today. Continued success. Thank you for being here with us on the Accounting Technology Lab. Good day.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll be back next Saturday with a new episode of the Technology Lab from CPA Practice Advisor. Have a great week.